and welcome to Nana's Crafty Home. My name is Tanya. Today's tutorial is going to show you how to add cross stitch to a single crochet project. This is definitely beginner friendly. I am using a cup cozy, beginner friendly cup cozy that I have as a free pattern on my website. I also have a complete video tutorial for you as well for that cup cozy. You can also find the free graphs for the apple and the pumpkin, as well as the free patterns for both the pumpkin curly vine and the apple leaf on my blog. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, before you begin to cross stitch onto your project, you're going to want to take a look at your graph. Now, I'm working on something that's been made in the round. So you're going to be wanting to place your color work on the front side of your project. So you're going to want to center that on the front side. If this were flat, so if I wanted to make this graph onto a flat coaster or a pillow or something like that, you're going to want it to be evenly spaced from each side. So these are open stitches here. So I'm just going to be placing this evenly on this project. But if this were a coaster, I would want my apple to be evenly spaced. So if this were flat and I had 35 stitches in a flat row by row project, I would count how many at the widest my graph is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So if I had 35 total stitches to work with, I would subtract that 11, leaving me 24 stitches that I would want to have unworked. And I would want an even spacing. So I would want to divide that number by 2, which would be 12. So 24 divided by 2 would be 12. That means I would have 12 open stitches on this side and 12 open stitches on this side. And then my apple would be evenly spaced from each side of my project. It can also help if you place a stitch marker in one of the corners, the very right or the very left of your project. I usually work from the left to the right, so I would want to place my stitch marker in the bottom left corner. This is 13 rows total. My project is 13 rows in height. I have one open stitch at the top and one open stitch at the bottom. So one row is open here and one row is open here. So I know that my project is 11 stitches wide, but it is not 11 stitches wide at my bottom left corner. So if I wanted my width to come over here, and let's count 11 stitches over. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's not quite evenly spaced on where I want to put it. So I'd probably want to come over one more stitch. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So here would be the width of my project, and that looks even. And then so now I'm going to follow this stitch down until I have one row open here at the bottom, and then I'm going to count 3 stitches over. So 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to mark that single crochet as the bottom left corner, the very first stitch that I'll be making for this bottom row. And then I'm going to be working across this row my cross stitches. So I have my yarn on my needle. I have a cotton yarn the same weight as the cotton that I am working with here, but you can experiment with different weights to see what works best for you. Now I'm going to be working my very first stitch around that marked single crochet. So how do I work around a single crochet? So you can see here is the V from that single crochet stitch, and I'm going to be working my X, my cross, around that single crochet. So you can see that there's a natural gap in all four corners of that single crochet. One here, 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 and here. I want to start in the very bottom left side and insert my needle. It might even help you if you stretch slightly so that you can open those gaps up just slightly so you can see them a little bit better. I'm going to bring my needle up with my yarn and pull until I have enough left over to secure and weave in on the end, and I'm going to hold that off to the side on the back so it won't interfere with my needle as I'm working through the fabric. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to work every stitch of this row. So I will have 3 stitches here, skip a stitch, and then work 3 more stitches. So I'm working across 1 bar, and then I will work back the second bar. You want your bar going in the same direction. So my bottom bars will all be coming up from this corner, going down to this corner, coming up from this corner, going down in this corner. So following that, I came up this corner and I'm going to go across that single crochet into that natural gap on the other side in the opposite corner and pull my needle through. Don't pull too hard because otherwise you'll pull that yarn all the way through, and we want to leave enough on that back side. We want a nice even stitch. So my next single crochet sits right next to the one that I just worked, and you can pull these stitches open if you need to, just to see those natural gaps between. But here is that corner, and really it's that corner of the single crochet, it's that bottom right corner of that single crochet that you just worked around. So you're going to insert your needle from behind, working up and pulling your needle through. Again, nice even pressure when you pull those yarn strands through. And you're going to repeat on the opposite corner of the single crochet that you're working around. Insert your needle into that gap and pull. So you can see I'm working my left to right bars for each cross stitch across my row. That gap on the bottom right corner of that single crochet, pull up your needle, work across that single crochet, and push down your needle. So I've worked all 3 of these stitches in one direction. Now I want to skip that next single crochet. So instead of inserting my needle here to work around that single crochet, I'm going to skip it, and I'm going to go to that next corner and insert my needle. Go across that single crochet and down in that bottom right corner, come up, down on the opposite corner, come up on that bottom right, and then across and down. So I've worked the first bar of the first row, and I'm ready to come back and finish each of these cross stitches by working that bar that goes over top. So now I'm going to be inserting my needle in that bottom right corner of that same single crochet that I just worked, and now I'm going to go in the same place where I placed this bar. I'm going to be going into that same gap. So I'm going into the opposite corner, working around that single crochet and pulling my needle through. and I've worked my very first cross stitch. And I'm going to repeat that for each of these cross stitches. So I'm bringing my needle up into that same space that I worked this bar here on the bottom right of this single crochet, and then working across. Bringing up my needle, going across that single crochet. So remember, we skip this single crochet and we come down to the opposite corner here and pull up our needle. Down in the opposite, the next single crochet, across, come up, and then down. So I've completed my first row of cross stitches. Now I'm ready to move on to my second row. So I'm going to come up to work this row of cross stitches, and I'm going to repeat the same thing that I just did, working each lower bar all the way across, and then working my top bar coming back this direction. Now I need to come over one stitch. So I need to work over one single crochet from the one that I just finished. In order to do that, you can see that this was my last bar that I worked of this single crochet. So the one right above it would be this single crochet right here. But I want to come over one. So I'm going to bring my needle up into the gap around this single crochet. And then come across on the opposite corner and go down. So I'm going to be working 9 bottom bars without skipping any stitches, and I should be coming over one extra stitch on this side if I've done it correctly and counted my stitches correctly. So just go ahead and repeat those same steps all the way across. Needed. And now I'm ready to come back through and work the second bar, the top bar of each of these stitches. Now for row 4, I'm moving up, and you can see that I'm not coming over again like I have been. This stitch is going to be directly above this stitch. If you were to work that bar just the way that you normally had been and come up this gap, you're going to undo the stitch that you just made. So when you're working stitches in rows directly above each other, instead of inserting your needle into that same gap that you just went down, you're going to come across to work that bar across and come down into the opposite direction. But once you've worked that first stitch, now you can continue on working each stitch just the way you were before, by coming into that bottom corner, bringing up your needle, and working across. It's just that first stitch that you're just going to need to work just slightly different so that you don't undo your work. But you'll just continue on working your pattern. So I finished all of the red throughout for my apple, and you can see that I skipped 3 on this row. I skipped 3 on this row in the red because that's where my brown is going to be. And so I'm just coming in to that middle single crochet and working over that middle one, leaving one unworked on both sides. And then there's one right on top of it. And I've completed my last stitch for my apple. So now you're going to want to secure and weave in the ends on the back side. And you can see it's going to be kind of messy on the back. So this is probably isn't something that you'd want to do for a project like a blanket where you would see the back side of your work. But in a situation where you're not going to see that back side, pillow, cup cozy like this one, the back of a placemat, and even with a pillow, I wouldn't even recommend too much weaving in the end, just knotting it, securing it, and then you could just cut it short. And then that way you wouldn't even have to weave in those ends if you can just stuff your pillow. I hope you found this tutorial helpful today. Thanks so much for being with me. As always, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you never miss a new video. And make sure to head over to nanascraftyhome.com where you can find all of my free patterns and tutorials. Thanks again, everyone. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.